Deputy Assistant Director of the Department of Homeland Security and the former Assistant Director of the U.S. Marshal Service, Arthur Roderick. All right, good evening, Arthur.
Good evening, Judge.
Do you believe, as the sheriff seems to suggest, that Matt and Sweat were together at the time that Matt was shot, or do you think that they had split up at that point?
Judge, that's a very good question. I think at this point you have to make the assumption that they were together. Now, obviously, the last confirmed sighting of Sweat was in that cabin a couple weeks ago in Dannemora.
Right.
But having surrounded and taken care of Matt, I think the assumption, you have to use the assumption that, hey, they were probably still together and that we have to cordon off this area and do a complete search of the whole area. Now, I think the other interesting fact, Judge, is that both these sightings have occurred on weekends. So people are starting to come up and open up their cabins. They're coming up for the holiday season. We have a short week this week, and hopefully we can catch this guy by Wednesday, because I think Thursday more people are going to come up
Without a doubt.
and find their cabins broken into.
Without a doubt. But now that Sweat is clearly on his own, what disadvantages are there to his not having a partner?
I think that's a huge disadvantage. He's on his own. They can't do shifts to stay awake and basically bolster each other psychologically and physically. He's by himself, obviously under an immense amount of stress. It's been over 3 weeks now, and he's at a huge disadvantage. Usually when these inmates escape together and they split and we catch one, the capture on the other one is not that far behind.
Well, you know, that's assuming that they were in the same vicinity at the time, which we still don't know about. But, you know, given the fact that Matt's DNA was all over the second cabin in Malone, why wasn't Sweat's if they were together?
That's a good question. And I mean, you could make the assumption that they probably were not together. But I think having the shootout there in that area, you have to cover all contingencies.
Sure. And
the sheriff is correct. You've got to cordon off that area and do a complete search. And it sounds like they've whittled that area down pretty well over the past 24 hours.
Tell us about the perimeter that's been set up. It's my understanding that you've got some sharpshooters in the hard perimeter, and you know the outlying perimeter is a little different. Tell me about that.
Yeah, generally what they'll do is they'll set up an outer perimeter, usually with regular law enforcement officers, you know, corrections officers in uniform, and then the inner perimeter, the ones that are doing the hard search, will be your U.S. Marshal Special Operations Group, FBI, HRT, New York SWAT, the Border Patrol BORTAC units that are all heavily armed, tactical, heavily armored, and also probably have night vision scopes,
Sure.
night vision goggles.
All right. Tell me about a 20-gauge shotgun that, you know, that we've heard that Matt was holding and that he took from that first cabin. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, a 20-gauge shotgun obviously can do some damage. Any firearm can, but that's more of a skeet gun or a bird gun.
Right.
If I had a preference and I'm in a situation like this, the first thing I would want to do is pull a 12-gauge shotgun. That's what law enforcement uses in a lot of close-in type scenarios that they do in home entries. When they're executing search warrants, they'll use a 12-gauge shotgun.
What about the fact that he shot this 20-gauge at the camper that was being pulled by a trailer? I mean, what did he expect to accomplish with that?
I know they've called it an attempted carjacking. Could have very well been, but I think that comes right just down to the desperation that he was in at that point in time. I think he realized he had to get out of that area. Law enforcement was getting close, and basically, when he fired that shot, that was the beginning of the end for him.
All right, Arthur, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Judge.